This 1879 wedding photo looks ordinary at first glance. A bride in lace, a groom in his finest suit, smiling for the camera. But there's something in the groom's eyes that chills the soul. What was he hiding? Today, we'll uncover a story buried for over a century. A secret that no one in the town dared to speak of. Watch closely and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to explore. More hidden stories from America's past. The year was 1879. America was slowly recovering from the deep wounds of the Civil War. Reconstruction had ended just a few years earlier. And while the cities buzzed with the beginnings of industry, the small towns of the South moved at a gentler, quieter pace. Dusty roads wound through the countryside, lined with wooden fences that marked fields of wheat and corn, and children played along the edges, their laughter echoing across the open spaces. Life in these towns was simple but hard. Every family knew the weight of survival, how to stretch every dollar, how to mend clothes until they were threadbare, and how to rely on neighbors for help in times of need. Churches were the heart of these communities. Simple wooden structures with tall windows that let in the soft morning light. The sound of hymns floated over the town every Sunday, and weddings were moments of communal pride, moments where people could briefly forget hardship and celebrate love and hope. A wedding in 1879 was more than a personal celebration. It was a statement that life, despite the struggles and losses of the past, could continue. That joy could bloom even in small, dusty towns that carried the heavy memories of the war-dot families were close-knit, and news traveled slowly but surely. When someone in town passed away, everyone knew within the day. When a child was born, neighbors would gather to bring gifts and share their congratulations. But this closeness also meant that secrets were hard to keep, and those that were hidden often carried a weight all the heavier because they were so carefully buried. Rumors could swirl quietly, whispered behind closed doors, and sometimes those rumors were right, sometimes they were wrong, but every whisper left a mark. Technology was still limited. Photographs were rare and expensive, taken only on special occasions. A wedding photograph wasn't just a memento. It was a statement, a piece of history captured on delicate paper coated in silver. Posed portraits required patience and precision. The bride and groom would stand stiffly, expressions carefully held, because the exposure time demanded stillness. There was little room for natural smiles or laughter. Every line of the face, every shadow in the eyes, was recorded faithfully by the camera, sometimes revealing more than the sitter intended. This was a time when the past was never truly gone. Families remembered the Civil War, its losses and sacrifices, the relatives who would never return home. The stories of battles, burned homes, and stolen dreams were still told in quiet corners of the parlor, in voices tinged with sorrow. And yet, life went on. Towns held fairs and church picnics. Farmers planted and harvested. Children ran along the creaking boards of porches, chasing each other until the sun dipped low in the sky. It was a world of contrasts, beauty and hardship, joy and sorrow, hope and lingering fear. Into this world stepped Margaret Latham and William Parker. Their wedding would be a bright spot on the calendar of a small town trying to move forward. Yet, in a community where everyone's business was everyone else's, the past could not remain hidden for long. And while the townsfolk saw only the surface, the white lace, the polished shoes, the flowers carefully arranged in the church, the photograph taken on that day would later reveal truths that the town had not noticed at all. As we look at that photograph today, it might seem simple, even charming. But for those who understand the world of 1879, who know the weight of history and the unspoken tensions beneath small-town life, there is more than meets the eye. The era itself holds the first clues to a story that is not just about a wedding. It is about secrets, shadows, and the human truths that even time cannot erase. Margaret Latham was the kind of woman whose presence could quietly light up a room. She was in her early 20s, with soft brown hair carefully pinned under a delicate lace veil, and eyes that reflected both warmth and thoughtfulness. Her family was well respected in the town, known for their honesty, hard work, and the gentle guidance they offered to neighbors. Margaret had grown up helping her mother tend the garden, sew clothes, and care for her younger siblings. Life had not always been easy, but she carried herself with dignity and quiet strength, a combination that made her beloved by friends and family alike. Her wedding day was, for Margaret, a dream come true. She had imagined this moment for years, walking down the aisle, joining her life with the man she loved, surrounded by the people who had watched her grow from a young girl into the woman she had become. Her dress, made of fine lace with delicate embroidery, was a gift from her mother, a labor of love stitched with care and pride. Every detail was attended to, from the bouquet of freshly picked flowers to the carefully polished shoes, because this day was meant to be perfect in every way. And then there was William Parker. William was handsome, tall, and confident, with dark hair combed neatly, and eyes that seemed to hold an intensity beyond his years. On the surface, he appeared to be the ideal groom, strong, dependable, and devoted. His suit was tailored to perfection, his posture proud, and the slight smile he wore suggested a man ready to embrace the life ahead. The townspeople admired him for his appearance, his apparent charm, and the way he carried himself with ease among friends and neighbors. To them, he was a man of promise, someone who could provide stability and comfort to Margaret, someone worthy of their respect. But photographs, as they say, tell more than the eye can see. Even in that carefully posed portrait, there were hints that William carried burdens and shadows the townsfolk could not know. The faint lines on his face, the way his gaze lingered on the distance rather than the camera, suggested a depth of thought, perhaps unease. At the time, few would have recognized it, and those who did might have dismissed it as nervousness before the ceremony. Yet, in hindsight, those small details were clues, subtle signs of a man with a past that was far from clean. Despite these hidden tensions, the couple was celebrated. Friends and family gathered in the small wooden church, bringing gifts, food, and their warmest wishes. Children ran along the edges of the pews, trying to peek at the flowers or the lace of Margaret's dress. The air was filled with excitement, whispered congratulations, and the quiet hum of a town pausing to enjoy a moment of happiness. This day, they all believed, would mark the beginning of a life filled with love, prosperity, and peace. For Margaret, the joy was unmistakable. She had found a partner she trusted, someone who seemed to promise a future of comfort and companionship. Her smile, gentle but sincere, captured that hope perfectly, a hope that, unbeknownst to her, would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. William, too, presented an image of devotion, though his heart carried secrets that were not yet ready to be revealed. As the camera clicked, capturing this moment for eternity. Margaret and William stood side by side, hand in hand. They looked every bit the perfect couple, frozen in time for the townspeople and generations to come. But the photograph, in its silent, unforgiving way, would later reveal the truth that everyone around them could not yet see, a truth written not in their smiles, but in the shadows of William's eyes and in the small, almost imperceptible tension in his posture. This portrait would remain, preserved over a century, as a testament to a wedding that seemed ordinary, joyful, and complete, yet hiding a story that was anything but ordinary. In the eyes of the bride and groom, the happiness of the moment was captured, but so too were the whispers of a darker tale that history would eventually uncover. As the wedding day unfolded, the townsfolk admired the couple's poise, the careful arrangements, and the delicate beauty of the ceremony. Yet, even amidst the flowers, lace, and cheerful faces, there was a subtle tension that few could put into words. It was not something that could be measured or explained. It was a feeling, a whisper beneath the surface of what should have been pure joy. For those who paid attention, the unease began in William Parker's eyes. There was a sharpness there, a depth of thought that seemed out of place on a day meant for happiness. The photograph captured it perfectly. In the faint shadows around his eyes, there was something that the townsfolk might have dismissed as fatigue or nervousness. But history has a way of revealing itself through detail, and even then, those shadows hinted at something more, something hidden behind a carefully cultivated exterior. William's posture was impeccable, his hand resting on Margaret's with the outward appearance of devotion. Yet the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes, betrayed an inner turmoil that no one dared to question. That Margaret, blissfully unaware, radiated warmth and hope. She smiled softly for the camera, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The subtle beauty of her presence contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of unease emanating from her groom. Friends whispered to each other, commenting on the day, the flowers, and the joy of the occasion. Yet even among the celebration, the feeling lingered like a shadow that refused to be chased away. This unease was not limited to the photograph alone. William had always carried himself in a way that inspired curiosity. Those who had known him in childhood remembered a quiet, watchful demeanor, a tendency to linger in the corners of rooms and observe rather than participate. In small-town America, such traits were often overlooked, passed off as shyness or reserve. But in hindsight, these subtle behaviors were part of a larger pattern, one that would later help historians piece together a more troubling narrative. Even the townspeople, in their admiration for the couple, seemed to sense a faint discord that they could not name. It was in the way neighbors shifted uncomfortably when William entered a room, the way certain conversations trailed off when he spoke, and the whispered exchanges that occurred behind closed doors. There was no overt conflict, no scandalous event, just a feeling of wrongness, faint but persistent, like the echo of a storm yet to arrive. The camera, of course, recorded none of the whispers. It captured only what was visible, the stiff poses, the carefully arranged flowers, the formal smiles. Yet in the photograph's unforgiving clarity, the tension was preserved. William's eyes, dark and shadowed, seemed to communicate a story the others could not see. Those who looked closely might notice the discrepancy between his outward posture of pride and his inner tension. The subtle discord between appearance and truth. It was in this way that photographs of the era served as both keepsakes and revelations. They preserved more than memory. They captured essence, emotion, and sometimes secrets. The subtle unease in William's eyes would remain unnoticed by most at the time, but over a century later, it would be the first clue to understanding the chilling truth that lay behind the perfectly posed wedding day. This was not yet the day of revelation, nor even the first whisper of scandal. It was simply the quiet beginning, a moment frozen in time where joy and dread existed side by side, where a photograph unknowingly preserved the shadow of a story that would eventually shock a town and leave history questioning what lies beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary moment, even in a town where everyone knew each other. Rumors had a way of weaving through the streets quietly, like threads in a tapestry. William Parker's past was no exception. On the surface, he appeared to be a model young man, polished, polite, and seemingly devoted to Margaret. But beneath that carefully maintained exterior, there were whispers that traveled slowly, cautiously, from neighbor to neighbor. People spoke in hushed tones about odd disappearances in nearby counties, about incidents that were never fully explained, and about small but unsettling patterns in William's life. Letters exchanged between families in neighboring towns hinted at troubles long forgotten. Some mentioned sudden moves, sudden breaks in employment, and strange encounters that left witnesses uneasy. Others were more direct, warning of behaviors that seemed charming at first, but carried a darkness beneath. At the time, no formal accusations had been made. There was no trial, no evidence concrete enough to bring forward. Yet these hints lingered in the community, like the distant rumble of thunder, an omen that few could ignore entirely. Even William's own acquaintances had noticed subtle warning signs. Friends recalled times when he became unusually withdrawn, moments when his expressions shifted in ways that could not be explained. A smile might mask a tightening jaw. A friendly gesture might be accompanied by a fleeting hardness in his eyes. It was subtle, easy to dismiss, yet persistent attention that lingered in corners of conversations, in glances exchanged, and in moments that seemed ordinary at the time. That the wedding photograph captured none of the town's whispered suspicions directly. It froze only the surface, Margaret's gentle smile, William's confident pose. But the camera had inadvertently recorded something deeper. William's eyes, slightly shadowed and intense, seemed to betray a mind preoccupied with something the outside world could not see. That gaze, innocent to the untrained eye, was a silent testament to the weight he carried, a hint of guilt and unease that would only be understood decades later. Even the wedding guests, caught up in the excitement of the day, noticed tiny anomalies, small moments that seemed out of place. Perhaps it was the way William's hand lingered a second too long on the railing, or the faint tightness of his lips when speaking to relatives. Perhaps it was the occasional stiffness in his movements, the subtle pause before answering a question. No one spoke of it. To mention such things on a day of celebration would have been unthinkable. Yet in retrospect, these fleeting moments were pieces of a larger puzzle, clues that the photograph would preserve in silent clarity. History, as it often does, reveals its truths slowly. What seems innocent at the time may, years later, be seen in a much darker light. The wedding day, carefully arranged and celebrated, carried with it the quiet presence of a secret that would not remain buried forever. The shadows in William Parker's eyes were more than photographic artifacts. They were a reflection of the weight of unspoken actions, of rumors that were more than mere gossip, and of a past that would eventually demand attention. By the time the photograph was carefully stored, its true significance remained hidden. Margaret and William would continue with their lives, blending into the rhythm of the town, unaware of how future generations would interpret the silent warnings captured in that single frozen image. Yet even now, in the photograph, the first signs of darkness were etched clearly, waiting patiently to tell a story long after those present had returned to their daily routines. It was the beginning of a revelation that would unfold slowly, piece by piece. The unease of that day, the whispers in the streets, and the shadows in the groom's eyes would eventually converge, to reveal a chilling truth. One glance at William Parker's eyes in this photograph would tell a story that no one living in 1879 could have imagined. The day of the wedding dawned crisp and bright. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of tall oaks, casting long shadows on the dusty streets of the small town. The air was filled with the scent of freshly cut flowers, mingled with the faint aroma of bread baking and wood smoke drifting from nearby homes. Townspeople bustled with excitement, offering congratulations to neighbors, adjusting ribbons on hats, and ensuring that the small wooden church looked perfect for the ceremony. Inside the church, everything was arranged with meticulous care. The pews were polished, the aisles lined with wildflowers gathered from nearby fields. Candles flickered gently in brass holders, lending a soft, warm glow to the dark wooden interior. The organist practiced quietly in the corner, the notes floating across the room, blending with the hum of whispered greetings and the rustle of fine dresses. Guests, dressed in their Sunday best, waited with anticipation. Mothers fussed with ribbons and hats, Children tiptoed to see the bride, and men adjusted their coats and hats nervously. Trying to appear composed, Margaret entered the church slowly, her heart beating with a mixture of joy and anticipation. Every eye turned toward her as she walked down the aisle, the lace of her dress brushing softly against the polished wooden floor. Her veil framed her face like a halo, softening the edges of her nervous smile. She looked radiant, every detail of her appearance chosen with care and love. It was a moment she had dreamed of, imagined countless times, and now it was real. The gentle murmur of approval and admiration followed her every step. William Parker stood at the altar, hands steady, posture perfect. He smiled, a practiced expression of calm and pride, though his eyes betrayed a faint tension. There was an intensity in his gaze, a fleeting shadow that seemed almost out of place in the bright, sunlit church. Yet to the guests, he appeared devoted, poised, and ready to take on the responsibilities of marriage. His hand reached for Margaret's as she approached, and the couple clasped hands, a union observed by family, friends, and neighbors. The ceremony proceeded as expected. Vows were exchanged in quiet, solemn tones, promises made to cherish, protect, and honor one another for the rest of their lives. The organ played softly, and the voices of friends and family rose in hymn and song, echoing off the wooden beams. Laughter occasionally broke through the formality, as children whispered and fidgeted, and a few smiles spread across the guests' faces. For everyone present, the moment felt sacred, a celebration of love and hope that transcended the struggles of everyday life. And yet, even amidst the happiness, the subtle tension lingered. The shadow in William's eyes, invisible to most, remained. There was a slight stiffness in his posture, a careful control of his expressions, a vigilance that no one could quite name. These small details, unnoticed at the time, would later become key clues for historians and descendants trying to piece together the story behind the photograph. By the time the ceremony ended, Margaret and William were pronounced husband and wife. Applause filled the church, and congratulations followed as the couple exited into the sunlight. They smiled, hands clasped tightly, presenting the image of perfect union. For the townsfolk, it was a day of joy, beauty, and celebration. Yet the photograph, taken at that very moment, had captured more than the smiles. It had recorded the quiet tension, the shadows behind the groom's eyes, and the subtle unease that would one day reveal a chilling truth hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary wedding day. It would take years, decades even, for the full story behind William Parker to come to light. At the time of the wedding, no one could have imagined the shadows lurking beneath his polished exterior. Yet the clues were always there, faint, subtle, and easily dismissed, preserved quietly in letters, records, and, of course, in the haunting photograph. Historians later uncovered letters exchanged between William and distant relatives, fragments of diaries, and old court documents that had long been tucked away in dusty drawers. These documents painted a picture far different from the man the town had celebrated. There were accounts of sudden disappearances, unexplained absences from work, and trips he had taken alone that seemed innocent but were never fully explained. Each piece, when examined in isolation, seemed harmless. Together, however, they revealed a pattern, a chilling glimpse into a life marked by secrecy, manipulation, and a quiet darkness that few had suspected. Some letters suggested that William had a knack for winning the trust of those around him, charming townspeople and relatives alike, all while hiding a dangerous cunning. He was careful, calculating, and meticulous in maintaining appearances. He knew how to speak with authority, how to offer comfort and concern, and how to blend seamlessly into the rhythm of small-town life. To his neighbors, he was merely polite, perhaps even admirable. But history tells us that appearances can be deceiving. One particularly revealing diary entry. written by a distant cousin who had visited the town shortly before the wedding, hinted at a series of unsettling behaviors. The cousin wrote of strange nights when William would leave abruptly, without explanation, returning hours later with a distant, almost haunted look in his eyes. There were mentions of heated arguments conducted in hushed tones behind closed doors, and the subtle manipulation of those around him. The cousin had tried to warn Margaret's family, but was dismissed. After all, what young woman's family would question the character of a man on the eve of her wedding? The photograph taken at the wedding now seemed to confirm these documents in a way no written word ever could. William's eyes, dark and intense, hinted at a conscience burdened by acts and thoughts he had never revealed. Even in the joy of the moment, in the careful smiles and polished appearances, there was a flicker of guilt and calculation, a reminder that no human soul is ever fully transparent, no matter how sincere it appears. As the years went on, the impact of William's hidden past began to unfold in the lives of those closest to him. Margaret, initially blissful in her marriage, began to notice inconsistencies, small lies, and secrets that weighed heavily on their household. She noticed the sudden absences, the cryptic phone calls, and the way William's eyes sometimes seemed to harden when certain topics were mentioned. For her, the realization came slowly, a creeping sense that the man she had married was not entirely who he appeared to be, and that the happiness of the wedding day had masked a deeper, more troubling reality. The townspeople, too, came to recognize what had been hidden in plain sight. Stories circulated quietly, neighbors recalling odd behavior, children recounting strange encounters, and relatives sharing memories that now took on a more sinister meaning. William Parker, once admired and celebrated, began to be remembered with unease. And yet, for historians and curious descendants, the photograph remained the most striking testimony of all. A frozen moment capturing the duality of appearance and reality, innocence and guilt, love and deception. In the end, the chilling truth was this: that single image, taken on a seemingly perfect day, captured far more than the memory of a wedding. It preserved the weight of secrets, the subtle darkness in a man's heart, and the unspoken tensions that no one dared acknowledge at the time. Every smile, every hand held, every carefully posed detail was now seen in a new light, a reminder that history is not only written in events, but in the shadows captured in the eyes of those who lived it. When the truth of William Parker's past began to surface, the aftermath rippled quietly but powerfully through the lives of those connected to him. For Margaret, the realization was devastating. She had entered her marriage full of hope, trust, and love, believing she had found a partner who would share a lifetime of happiness. The discovery that the man she had married carried such shadows and secrets left her reeling. The warmth she had once associated with his smile was now tinged with fear and uncertainty. Every glance, every past conversation, every moment of seeming intimacy began to be questioned, reframed in the light of the hidden truths. Margaret's family, too, felt the weight of betrayal and confusion. They had celebrated the wedding, had welcomed William with open arms, believing him to be honorable and devoted. Now they found themselves caught between loyalty to family and the painful knowledge that their trust had been misplaced. Conversations turned to whispered debates in parlors and kitchens, neighbors sharing quiet concern for Margaret's well-being, yet unsure how much to reveal or confront. In small towns, reputation was everything, and to expose William's past fully could shatter not just his name, but the delicate balance of community harmony. The town itself seemed to shift in response, though subtly. People recalled odd moments, things that had once seemed insignificant, and now took on a more sinister meaning. The friendly nods in the street were tinged with a new awareness. What had been overlooked during the excitement of the wedding, the sudden absences, the tense expressions, the small moments of unease, were now pieces of a larger puzzle that no one had anticipated. Conversations that once seemed mundane became examinations of character and morality, as the town collectively grappled with the unsettling realization that darkness could hide behind even the most ordinary faces. Yet life continued. Margaret carried on with her days, tending to her home, visiting neighbors, and participating in the routines of the town. Outwardly, everything seemed as it had before: polite smiles, careful social appearances, and the everyday rhythms of small-town life. But behind closed doors, the air was heavy with unease. Margaret's joy had been replaced with caution. Her trust had been fractured. She moved through the world with a new awareness, one that no photograph, no ceremony, and no outward display of happiness could undo. For historians and descendants who would study the Parker family decades later, the wedding photograph became a symbol of duality, a frozen moment of beauty and celebration, and at the same time, a silent witness to deception and hidden truths. Researchers could see in William's eyes the guilt, the cunning, and the weight of secrets that had gone unspoken for so long. The photograph became more than a keepsake. It became evidence, a testament to the idea that appearances are often misleading, and that history has a way of preserving what the living might wish to forget. In the aftermath, Margaret's story took on the qualities of resilience. Though she had been blindsided by William's secrets, she found ways to navigate the challenges of her life with strength and dignity. She became a quiet observer of the town, aware of human complexity and the fragile line between trust and deception. The town, too, learned a hard lesson about appearances and judgment, realizing that beneath every polite smile could lie a story untold, and that history often has more to teach than the events themselves. The wedding photograph remained, carefully stored, a silent reminder of the day when joy and unease coexisted. It captured not just the faces of Margaret and William, but the emotional tension of a moment that would come to define a family's history and eventually offer a window into the moral complexities of life in 1879. It is a haunting record of the fragility of trust, the shadows hidden in plain sight, and the ways in which the past never truly disappears, but lingers, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look closely. As we return our gaze to that faded 1879 wedding photograph, it may seem, at first glance, like a simple image of happiness and union. Margaret in her delicate lace, William standing beside her, both posed carefully for the camera. It looks ordinary, even charming. But history teaches us that photographs are more than mere records of appearance. They capture subtle truths, moments frozen in time that the human eye might overlook, but that the lens preserves with uncanny honesty. In William Parker's eyes, the shadows remain. They speak of secrets, choices, and a past concealed beneath a veneer of civility. They remind us that the past is never as simple as it seems. Even on the brightest days, human hearts carry burdens, regrets, and hidden stories. For Margaret, the photograph represents more than her wedding. It embodies the fragility of trust and the unexpected weight of deception. For the town, it is a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that the people we think we know best may hold hidden truths, revealed only by careful observation, or, in this case, by a single, unblinking camera lens. What makes this photograph so compelling is its duality. On one hand, it is a testament to hope, celebration, and human connection. On the other, it preserves a quiet warning that behind every smile there may be a story untold, a shadow lurking in plain sight. History, in this way, becomes more than dates, names, and events. It becomes a living narrative, full of lessons about character, trust, and the human condition. This photograph, and the story it holds, serves as a bridge connecting us to a moment long gone, yet still resonant today. As we reflect on this tale, there is a profound emotional resonance. The joy of the wedding day, The careful planning, the pride of family and friends, all these elements contrast sharply with the darkness that only time has revealed. It reminds us that life is complex and that every story has layers waiting to be uncovered. For those who cherish history, for those who seek understanding of human nature across the decades, this photograph becomes a window, a rare glimpse into the intertwining of light and shadow, of innocence and hidden truth. So, next time you look at an old photograph, remember to look closely. Notice the eyes, the posture, the subtleties that may seem insignificant. History often hides in these details, in moments that appear ordinary but are laden with unspoken meaning. This 1879 wedding photograph may appear simple, but one glance at the groom's eyes tells a story that endures, a chilling narrative that survived time, waiting for someone to uncover it. If you've enjoyed exploring this story of hidden history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. Every faded photograph holds a story, and there are countless more waiting to be discovered. Stay with us and continue uncovering the mysteries, the secrets, and the forgotten tales of America's past, one image at a time. History is not just in books. It is in the shadows, the eyes, and the silent moments captured forever.